Hello, welcome to Exploring Our Imaginations Through Reading, Elements of Literary Texts. Research shows that when families participate in children's education, children usually do better in school. So one of the purposes of today's session is to help you help your child in the area of reading, in particular responding to reading and writing. The overview of what we're going to cover today is 1, what is literary text? 2, what standards are addressed in this element? And 3, what standards will be addressed in the first session? And then also we have a resource that we're going to be giving you, which we're going to go over. What is literary text? Literary texts are stories that are not true, although sometimes literary text stories are based on reality, but things that didn't really happen. One example is poetry. Another example, and this particular book is called The Three Little Javelinas, are fairy tales. This one is a twist on The Three Little Pigs. Another example are folk tales. Thunder Rose, which is an example of a tall tale. And Pigs Can't Fly, which is a type of fantasy. So all of those are examples of literary texts, and all of those types of texts are found on the 3rd grade OAA. Standards. All of the different parts of the OAA have what you call standards, and under those standards are grade level indicators. Grade level indicators are what your child should know and be able to do by the end of 3rd grade. So some of the 3rd grade level indicators under literary text are 1, students need to be able to recognize and describe similarities and differences of plot across literary works. What that means is when students have different books that they're reading, for example, if they're reading different types of Cinderella stories, they have to be able to describe how are those stories the same and how are those stories different. The 2nd grade level indicator is that students must be able to use details from the text to describe characters and setting. The characters in a story are the animals and or people in the story, and the setting is when and where the story takes place. Not only do students have to be able to describe a character using character traits, which are words like kind, friendly, generous, etc., they have to be able to give the evidence that outlines why they feel the character is that way. The 3rd grade level indicator is retelling the plot sequence. What this means is that students have to be able to retell the story, what happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle, and what happened in the end. And also, they have to be able to state the problem and how that problem was resolved in the story. Another grade level indicator is that students must be able to identify and explain the defining characteristics of literary forms. So as I stated earlier, there are different types of literary texts: poetry, tall tales, folk tales, etc. Students have to be able to define the characteristics of each of these types of books. Okay, so today we're going to talk about character, setting, and plot. So as I alluded to in the last slide, students have to be able to recognize the similarities and differences in plot across literary works. They have to be able to use details from the text to describe characters and setting, and they have to be able to retell the plot sequence. This is the resource notebook that we provided that can be downloaded online. This resource notebook has sample reading passages, graphic organizers, samples of completed graphic organizers, a reading writing dice game, writing prompts, a suggested reading list, suggested reading websites, a reading log, and genre charts and diagrams. All right, the first portion of the notebook has sample reading passages. There is one OAA passage, and the other are passages that cover the different genres that we talked about earlier. So this first passage right here, The Giant Who Threw Tantrums, is a sample of what students actually receive on the OAA. Another component of the notebook are graphic organizers, and there are a lot of graphic organizers on the OAA. Graphic organizers are just a different way that students respond to text in a more organized form. So this particular one covers character traits, and each graphic organizer that is in the book is very, very clear as to the expectations. So for example, this one asks for a character trait and then it also asks for the evidence from the text. But at the bottom, if your child or you are not really quite sure what a character trait is, there are some examples. For example, angry, clever, determined, excited, frustrated, etc. So what your child would do would be to list the character, list that particular character trait, but they must go back into the text and find evidence that says why that particular character is that way. Also, at the bottom of each of the graphic organizers is the grade level indicator that it covers. There are two different types of questions that students respond to in writing on the OAA. One is worth 2 points, and those are short answer responses, and the other is worth 4 points, and those are the extended responses. So when you go through your book, you have a rubric for the 4-point answers. I'm not going to go over that in detail, but it is here for your reference. In addition, we have several completed graphic organizers that have scores on them, with 4 being the highest, so that you can kind of compare what your child is doing at home to what they actually should be doing and what it would be graded on by those who score the OAA. There are 2 different types of dice game included in this resource book as well. The first is entitled Read and Roll. And what happens is your child takes a die, they roll it, and according to the number that comes up, that's the type of writing activity that they do. So for example, if they roll a 1, they would write a summary of the chapter or section of the book that they read that particular evening. If they rolled a 3, they would create a timeline to show the major events in their story, but they have to also include illustrations. Second one. Okay. The second die game is called Roll and Write. With this one, they are actually writing a story based on the numbers that they roll. So they have to roll the die to figure out what type of setting they're going to have in their story. They also have to roll to find out what type of character will be in their story. And then finally, they have to roll to find out what type of plot they would have. So for example, let's just pretend they rolled all 1s. They would write a story where they were at the beach last summer. Their character would be a group of kids, and the plot would be that they were looking for lost treasure. Also, we have some suggestions for reading response topics. So what you could do before your child actually reads the story is to choose a topic, and that's what they would write about when they're finished. So some topics would be explain how the main character changed as the story continued, or write about something that was surprising in your book. Another nice feature of this notebook is what we call the 3rd grade book list. This book list has several different portions. It has the title, it has the author, and then it also has the library location as to where the book is located in the Columbus Metropolitan Library. The books are also separated by area. So for example, you have books that help students summarize. You have books that help students analyze characters and setting. You also have poetry books, and then you have books that are good for comparing and contrasting. In addition to the book list, we also have some recommended reading websites. So for example, we have Giggle Poetry, Fun Brain, Book Adventure. These are different types of reading websites that can support your child in reading at home. Another portion of the notebook is what we call book genres. Earlier we talked about the different types of literary texts. Well, all of those different types are listed here: realistic fiction, mystery, fantasy, historical fiction, traditional literature, and science fiction. And then there's also a definition of what each is. In addition to that, there is another book list, but this one is separated by genre. So you have realistic fiction, historical fiction, etc. Okay, so to close out, what you need to do is, number 1, have your child choose a passage from the notebook. 2, have your child choose a prompt. 3, they'll read the passage, and then finally they will respond to the prompt in writing. And then of course you're going to check over their work to make sure that they did provide the evidence from the text to support their answer. We hope that you are able to use these strategies and this notebook with your child at home. Thank you for listening and watching.